Good morning, everybody. I know Sunday morning is not a good time to wake up early, but when there's a question so important that we are asking, I'm sure most of you are here to find the answer for that question. Hello, hi, and welcome from Climate Coaching Alliance. And it's an honor and pleasure for me, Rashmi Shetty from Bangalore, India, who's a member with CCA Global, to be hosting this show and having an amazing Srivi Kalyan with me. But before we go to find out who Srivi is, a little brief on CCA. The Climate Coaching Alliance was formed way back in 2019 with a conversation that started off between three beautiful women, Dr. Josie McLean, Dr. Alison Vibro, and Eve Turner. The spirit of Dr. Alison Vibro is with us this festival. She was there as part of the entire planning, but then had lost her battle to cancer. But we know she's watching over with a lot of joy because this was something that she would have really enjoyed. CCA started off with conversations and moved on today to become a movement. And today we have 1,700 members globally with us, and the number is just growing. And all we do, we have members from all different professions and fields who find nature as an important stakeholder in part of our conversations with whatever we do. And all it takes is to visit the website cca.org.in to be part of what exactly CCA is doing, and it's completely volunteer driven. And talking about Srivi, our speaker for today, well, Srivi Kalyan is an artist, designer, educator, and writer. She works at the fluid and exciting intersection of arts, media, education, design, environment, and self reflection. She's authored and illustrated several books for children and adults and is an award winning writer and illustrator. She is currently one of the deans of the Cluster of Law, Environment and Planning at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bangalore. She is also the founder director of Funifers Arts Private Limited, and her personal work can be viewed at www.funifers.com. Shrivi, always a pleasure listening to you and working with you. I'm excited, and I'm sure everyone who's come in on time is also equally excited to learn from you. So it's all yours, Shrivi.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Josie, for being here. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this whole Climate Coaching Alliance. And it's a whole new world that's opening for me, and I'm very excited to be part of it. So just to sort of give a brief intro before I take the session forward. A lot of this work that I'm going to be sharing with all of you, and also what we will be working together on, has emerged from my recent doctoral work, where I started inquiring into what is my own relationship with nature. I said, let's stop looking outwards into what nature is, but ask what is inwards within us, and where do we find this connection that we have, which is in a way primordial connection, because we are part of nature. It's not like we are separate from it. So that's really where this whole quest for me started. And perhaps the quest itself started long before the doctoral work, but it's sort of culminated in this space. So I'm very excited to join in this journey with all of you. And I think all of us are asking this very crucial question of what can we do during this whole ecological crisis. And there is this sense of oftentimes despair, oftentimes just feeling lost and not knowing quite where to start. And it seemed that to me, perhaps the easiest place to start is ourselves, and also the hardest place in some ways. So that's really where we will be starting today also. And for those who joined in a little later, it'd be great if you could have a notebook, pencil, or pen to work with during the session. We'll be doing short exercises and things that will engage us to think deeper and maybe reflect deeper about our own connections with nature. Thank you. So I'm going to start with this poem which is also a prayer for me, and I wrote it way back in 2003. It's originally written in Tamil, so I'll read out the translation first, and then I'll go back and read the Tamil verse so we can get the sound of the words. Suddenly, a moment of joy arises in thought. Wind, sky, I, breath, mud, rain, heart, feeling, everything interwoven, soar into a new lineage of bliss. This was a flash of insight for me at that point. So the Tamil goes as Sattendru Sindanayil Anandam, Kaatru Vaan Kan Moochu, Man Malai Manam Unarvu, Indru Pudiya Marabe Anandam. It somehow opened the heart for me. It just suddenly, I was like, this human being who was just not there. And then there was all of this wind, mud, rain, everything interweaving into me. And it just opened a space in the heart to experience my own relationship with everything, in a way that was a flow into the creativity of life. So that's really one of the sort of recorded pieces of my experience. And over time, what I've realized is all of us are going through these experiences. As I talk to different people, they say, "Oh yeah, there is a moment when I remember this happened to me." And I think we don't realize how powerful that one moment is, and what it can open up for us, and how far we can go with it. So this whole journey into the porous self for me is to say that that moment is powerful, and let's give ourselves the right to that language and claim our being in porosity. So the other piece right next to this is a piece of art that I had created a long time ago, when I was probably around 16 years old. And it is part of my essay, Why Not Be Different? And for me, even at that point, difference was about this flow of life itself. So, as on the horizon I stood and watched, the mountains dissolve into rivers, the rivers into oceans, the oceans into those endless skies, storms, rains, and finally the earth into me. So, this is an abstract visualization again of an experience. So, from there, I'm just going to very briefly talk a little bit about my sense of porosity, and I hope that for each of you it will open up something similar, a memory or an experience that is your own notion of either porosity or something else that you may have termed it. So for me, I had experienced this feeling of oneness with landscape and other beings over many, many years. It was a deeply personal connection to the natural world, where there are moments when I cannot say that this is my identity. I cannot distinguish myself and say, I am Srivi and that is nature. I can study nature. That was not how it was. It was like I am nature and I don't quite know where the boundary of the self exists. And then I think more so in my doctoral time, I defined this experience as porosity. I thought that was the closest word in English that I could sort of use. And in Tamil, I use the word ullam, which is really a heart mind consciousness, interconnected heart mind consciousness, which is not to be seen as separate layers, but as one whole. So, porosity for me is a principle that allows us to experience the environment as a whole and not as separate different creatures, but you're really able to enter this whole rather than be in the parts. And if we think about it a little bit, we realize that every sensorial interaction that we have with the world is a continuous interaction with all the energies, whether it's tactile, whether it's tacit, or whether we cannot even see it. We cannot even feel it for sure, but it is there. And every sense experience is like that. So for me, that's when I said, oh, this is like just all pervasive. Because when you touch something, you're porous. When you feel something, you're porous. When you're emotional, you're porous. When you're reflecting on something, you're porous. And when you're breathing, and fundamentally, that's really where it starts, right? Your breath is the breath of something else. And that, just like, I was suddenly like, what are we talking about here? Because it's no more the mental model that we have been taught. It's no more the man or the human and the other. There is no separatist frame. There is only a single open sensuous frame. in which all of us are flowing in and out. And that's really the porous self to me, and that's how I see it. And in this artwork, I had imagined night as a woman as well, and also night as myself. So there is this whole sense of when you descend into the night, you're part of all of it. You're part of the stars, you're part of the skies, and you just melt into that space. And this painting was a moment capturing that experiencing of the night. So that brings us to the sort of question which we are exploring through the session. Is there really a boundary between man and nature? And what would it mean if we were to turn inward to resolve our relationship with the earth and cosmos through this shared bond of creativity that we have? So that's really where we are going to be taking this sort of interactive session moving from here onwards. Okay. So now it's really like over to you guys, because it's about going inward into yourself, and let's spend the next about an hour and 15 minutes deeply within yourself, and look at all those hidden spaces that we don't often take time to notice, we don't often take time to share. And because we don't do that, it seems like it doesn't exist. And it's like the quiet time of the evening. I was just on a walk with some of my students a couple of days back. And when the sun sets, there is this twilight moment. And in India, at least, it's like around 6:45, 7 p.m. that you experience this. The sky turns a very deep blue. It's not yet night. It's not evening anymore. But there is this intermediate space, and the shadows deepen. And you begin to see all that is so subtle that you missed earlier in the harshness of the light or in the darkness of the night. And in between, in that moment, you see the smallest leaf, you see the tiniest creeper, you see a particular shade on a rock, you just begin to see something scampering away. You catch details. And I think while, of course, we are doing it in mid-morning, let's imagine that we are in that evening moment and we can capture these details within ourselves in a much more mellow light, and see where it takes us. So I'm going to start this journey by taking you into a poem which really is about saying, what is your body? So let's start with a moment of being with our own body and saying, what else has this body experienced? On an everyday basis, we just think about the body as my body. I have to get up, I have to function, I have to do things, I have to walk. But there is this body that has had some of the most incredible, delightful, sensuous experiences of the world. We walk and we are touching the earth, we are touching the ground, we're looking up at the sky, we are breathing in the air. I mean, it's just incredible to imagine, however old we are, whether we are just 1 year old or whether we are 40, 70, 80, doesn't matter. This body is a vehicle of experience. And what is this body then? What is this body that we have created? Because it's not the body we were just born into, but it's a body that's created out of experience. So take a moment, and as I'm reading, perhaps reflect on your own body and the memories of your body in nature. And you can write down some of the things that are similar to perhaps this poem or other things that come to your mind. So I'll slow read this poem, and then we'll continue to keep on working on small exercises as we go forward. So Anandam is again a Tamil word, also a Sanskrit word, and it means bliss or great joy. This body in tune with that harmony, and that harmony in tune with this. This body in tune with gores, minivets, great banyans, storks and cranes and wild ketaki, torrential rain, and gentle waves lapping at the feet, herons in flight, and frogs hidden in shrub and rock crevices, deodars and rain trees, tiny rocks expanding into grand mountains, snakes in alert rest, and black-winged stilts in sinuous flight, embraced in light cascading through hills, black-headed ibis catching a fish, grasslands whispering, phoenix worms composting and making humus, moss and mist, carpets of pongamia and jacaranda, this body in tune with starlight and invisible life. So we'll slow down here and we'll just take a moment to breathe in and out. And as you're breathing, just close your eyes, go into a deeper space quietly and gently, asking yourself, where did this air come from? And start with the limits of your room. There may be your own family members around you, there may be friends around you. Start with that and say, did this air come from them? Has it been through them? And then you go beyond the limits of the room. What are your immediate surroundings? How far is this breath coming from? Are there trees around you? Are there plants around you? Is there soil around you? Where is this coming from? And then go further and further and further away. Is it coming from a coral reef very, very far away from you? Is it coming from a mountain? Is it from a bird or a beast? Is it from a fly or a mosquito? Whose breath are you breathing? And let's stay with that question, whose breath are you breathing? And just keep, as you're breathing in and out, keep inviting these beings whose breath you think you're breathing. Let them all come into you and be in a space where they move in and out of your body, just like your own breath. So just let's spend some time breathing. You're at this moment in your own room and you're breathing in a deep breath in and out. Breathe in and out as gently as you can. Let go of all other things and just think about whose breath are you breathing. Imagine your breath in every part of your body. Just imagine it going through each and every little limb, every little nerve, your bloodstream. Think about your breath permeating through you and keep asking, whose breath are you breathing? So we're going to ease in slowly out of it into continuing this exercise on the breath. The piece that you listen to is by Riley Lee and it's called El Sueno or The Dream, and it's part of his album Nalu the Moonrider. So we're just going to move into an exercise from this experience of the breath that you've had. This painting could be a moment of inspiration. It's sort of a visualization of the in-breath and the out-breath that I had done. And it was while listening to improvisations of Balinese musicians with musicians from Europe and US. So there was a collaborative sort of improvisation event that happened, and part of it was my experience of how the music flowed from one to the other. And to me, that was an experience of the in-breath and the out-breath, and this is my visualization of that. So let's sort of move in from the space you're in, and it's okay if you have not entered that kind of a space. At the moment, you can either work from your heart or you can work from your intellect. It does not quite matter. But let's start with just writing a simple poem or a narrative about all of these things, beings, and the distances that your breath has traveled. So let's just look at what did that imagination and wonderment of this moment of breath allow you to find. So it'll be great if even if you write 4 lines, 3 lines, it does not matter. But just to write a few lines, looking at this whole thing, this experience of breath that you went through just right now. So we'll just spend a few minutes on it. I'll continue to play the music and then we'll have a moment to share. So any of you would be open to sharing, we can at least take 1 or 2 sharings at the end of this. I know it's very little time and we shouldn't be doing it this fast, but if some of you feel like you have a few lines that you would like to share.
Can I go first, Srivi?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. And what came as soon as you gave time was walking and being, breathing and living, a little awareness, and I feel blessed. This pause is important. But then, whose breath are we breathing? As I walk, feel, and connect, this question is all I have teething.
So much, Rashmi. That was beautiful. Is there anybody else who would like to share? It can be unfinished, it can be incomplete. It's just a sense of um, the first words that come to you and the first thoughts that come to you.
Okay, so can I share, Srivi?
Yeah, sure.
So actually, I have written in Hindi, and I would like to share it, and I can just come up with the meaning. So I write, सोचा पहले माँ की गोद में लेटा हूँ, जो सबसे करीब है उसी की सांसें लेता हूँ. क्या वो मेरा प्रिय मित्र है जिसको गले लगाकर मैंने उसकी सांसें अंदर ली हैं, पर लगता है वो दूर कहीं है जो बाहर हरा भरा खड़ा है. So it says that maybe I have taken the breaths of my mother since my childhood. I am closest to her, and then after growing up, I feel that maybe that's my best friend whom I hug most of the time, and he's closest to me. And then I feel, no, it has traveled a long way, and it is someone who is breathing outside, which is green and full and flourishing outside my house. That is tree.
That's very lovely. Sorry.
Shubham.
Yeah, sure. That's very, very lovely. Thank you so much.
Beautiful, Shubham.
And it was lovely to hear it in Hindi. I think that's another point, perhaps, that I'd like to add, that in a space where many of us have perhaps lost our native languages or are in a very, very rapid globalization space where words that have these meanings of the landscape or these intrinsic connect to the landscape are somehow getting lost more and more. And I think language by itself is just remarkable. Yes, our own experiences may be intuitive, they may be what we feel, and we gather more than we might in words. But then finding words is perhaps the way we communicate to the world. And in that sense, it becomes so important to know how to articulate these very intangible and very tacit experiences. So the more sometimes that you think in your own native language and are able to articulate it, I think there is a lot that you bring to the world in doing that kind of sharing. So thank you very much for that. So I'll continue to move on, and I think in different exercises, I hope different people can participate, and it'd be great for us to then have a shared conversation at this end of the session. So the next one also continues on the breath, imagination, and experience that we did. One of the things that I find extremely powerful is the act of drawing. And it doesn't matter again if you're an artist or if you're not an artist. I think it's just the action of moving your hand, and somehow with your hand, your entire body moves. And that sort of connection that we bring from the land to which we are rooted, on which we are sitting, and through it, we bring it to this fingertip and we create. And in that, we somehow have a line of connection that we don't always observe. So can we draw this breath line? It's not the main line that we see. It's not a tree that you see. It's not a flower that you see. But the line that connects you and that, you and everything else around you. And simply just a line. And that line could be a flowing line. It could be a line that is just, really just bursting forth. It could be a thick line, it could be a thin line, it could be any kind of line that you feel is your breath. It could be the subtlest line, it could be the strongest line, it could be the boldest line, or it could be a line that's barely visible. But you can sense it and you can feel it. So again, the painting on the side or the drawing on the side is something I had illustrated for a book called The Sky Queen. And there is this very beautiful description that the author brings of Jnani Mete, who is the sky queen. And she arises out of the sea and joins, and at that moment, the sea and the sky join with her being in between. And this was my sort of illustration for it. And it's a Northeast Indian folk tale for which I illustrated. So I drew inspiration from their art forms and their musical instruments. And that's sort of like, for me, a line that connects earth and sky. It can be a form or it can just be a abstract line. So just give yourself another 2 minutes to find a line of flow between your own breath and the flow of life. And you can draw as many lines as you please. It doesn't have to stop with one line. You may find different lines that flow through you. It's just a visualization, it's an imagination. And for those of you who feel you're not sort of in that space, like I said, you can work from an intellectual space. You can imagine this and creatively construct a line that you feel may represent whatever you're understanding and not necessarily what you're feeling. Okay. Thanks for that moment that you've given. Would somebody be able to screen share your work, or would you like to speak about it? Whichever way works.
For me, the breath that I've drawn, it's kind of continuous because we're all breathing each other's breath. So it's just like a continuous form of line, like an infinite spiral kind of a thing.
Right. Okay. And how was the experience of drawing it? Is there something you'd like to share about that?
It was just kind of relaxing, and like I kind of went into like another space.
Mm-hmm. And if I may ask, are you an artist or designer? Are you coming from a background where this is?
I'm actually a Srishti student.
Okay, you're a student.
Yeah.
And do you feel like drawing this particular line opens out the possibility of a different kind of working with line for you? Does line
I'm
engage in a
not too
new?
sure about that, to be very
Okay,
honest.
okay. So that's something I don't know if anybody else would like to share what it felt like to draw this line. Any one more person who would like to share?
Hello, Srivi.
Yes, I am.
I just closed my eyes while I was breathing, and I had a pen in my hand, and I just went with the flow of my breath, and then when I opened my eyes, I was surprised to see the outcome. It was very, I mean, really just tried to follow the flow of my breath into the page.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it has opened the possibilities.
Right.
Of
And I think,
more like
I mean, if for artists particularly, I think finding this line allows you to explore a very, very organic flow in the kind of forms that you choose to create. And it's a continuous practice that you can build. And for non-artists, I think it just is very relaxing to get into that space. And we're like constantly in a rush. We are constantly in a hurry in the world that we've created today. And sometimes just to take that pause, like Rashmi's poem mentioned, I think it's just beautiful to pause and draw a line that connects. And for me, it's been a very, very refreshing and meaningful thing to do almost on a daily basis. And sometimes it's inspired by a creeper, sometimes by a lizard, sometimes by a monkey hanging on the grill. It's just infinite lines that open up to you when you connect to the natural world, and with that to yourself. So this is sort of, again, another exercise, and I'm going through a number of different exercises. Some of them may be too rapid for this session, but I hope it opens out possibilities that you can then later use in your own time, and not necessarily in front of a computer, but while you're walking, while you're somewhere more closer to the natural world than just in a room trapped in front of a computer. And hopefully some of us will be able to do this in live sketching and going on treks and hikes. So one of the things for me is that, especially if you're living in the city, then you often just miss nature. Nature is a backdrop to your life. So what is it that we can do to remember what we see? What is in the background? Can we bring it to the foreground? And can we remember simple things that happened? Like you may have been walking by a particular tree and you saw just one leaf fall, and it didn't matter so much, but it's there somewhere in the back of your memory. You may have been like going past in your bike and you felt that that particular breeze at that point of time was very gentle. It was very cool, it was gentle, and it was different from the breeze 3 minutes ago. And somehow you sensed it, but you didn't record it in your mind. So somewhere, if we can map some of these memories, that really is an exploration that we'll spend some time on. And again, in terms of mapping your memories, let's sort of take it deeper. I'm sharing some of my own art to say that what starts as a very, very brief exercise of experiencing can go all the way into a very, very beautiful creative work on one hand, but it can also move and change your consciousness at multiple levels. So what seems like a 2-minute exercise that we are doing on memory, if you just stay with that exercise for the days to come, for years to come, then that transforms you in so many different ways. So if we just look at first mapping your memories, just pick any 2 or 3 memories that was in the background, but you know that somewhere, you had recorded it. And even if you are somebody who's spending a lot of time in nature, even if you are closer to wilderness, it's possible that you are caught up, you are doing things, you are seeing things, but you haven't had the time to even record what you've experienced. And either way, this exercise sort of really helps to come back, reflect, and bring a moment to light. And with that moment, bring some part of you that connected to that moment to light. So just take, again, another maybe 5 minutes to think about 2 memories. And as you're working with that memory, think about which sense did you use the most. Like I had mentioned Pongamia blooms in one of the poems. When you go past in the Pongamia tree in that season, suddenly there is a very subtle scent in the air. And the first thing you see, yes, you see visually the shape and form of this very tiny bead-like flowers that are scattered all over the ground. But you also, have the scent in your memory. And that sense, which comes first? Is it the scent that sort of brought you to that visualization or that moment of great visuality? In some other place, it could be a sound. Like now, when I go for evening walks, I'm hearing peacocks every time, and peacocks and peafowls, and that sound really makes the landscape completely different. So it is through which sense are you seeing or experiencing a landscape? So map both a memory, a space, a place, and along with that, map the sense that perhaps triggered a observation or an experience for you. And when I say map at this point, it can just be jotting it down as notes. It could be like quick drawings, whichever is a comfortable way for you to map. It could be like a mind map that you create. It could be an interior geography that you want to draw. You could try different ways of doing things. So if anybody has doubts, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, you can just spend the next 5 minutes mapping your senses, feelings, and your experiences in nature. And a minimum would be 2, but you could always go more than that. And I'll play very beautiful music from Nawang Kechog, who's a Tibetan flautist, and the title of this piece is called The Wish Fulfilling Jewel in the Himalayas. And if anybody has doubts, please feel free to ask. I hope that gave all of you a little bit of time to go back and bring those memories that are not at the top of your surface, but somewhere a little bit below. Would somebody like to share? It'd be great to hear some voices.
I would like to share.
Yeah, sure.
So the first memory was out on a walk in the city and found a tree stump. It had been cut down because the stump had a hollow growing in it.
Okay.
And I noticed that there was a wild bee colony that had taken up residence there. And the second memory was just noticing, like, this was feet away from a road that 3 blocks away would get onto a freeway, and thinking about my yearning to hear the hum of the beehive, but I couldn't over the traffic.
Okay.
And in my reflection, I found that the beehive is a place for bees to live, and the city is a place for humans to live. And there's a similarity between the hum of the hive and the cars. But I'm finding that a little bit dissonant. So I get to think about that a little bit more. But thank you for this opportunity to think of those things together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful sharing. And I think this increasingly there's this space between this whole megaphony of all the things that humans have brought into the space and our own quest for a much more quieter sound, even though, I mean, I'm just thinking the shrieking of peacocks or the crows cawing are just, I mean, like they are in some way quite loud and incessant. But what is it that we are struggling with between this human production of sound and the natural sounds? And I think for me also there is that space of trying to find a balance and trying to find a certain sort of not quite acceptance, but understanding the two in both the same spaces. So thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to move on, given that I have a few more exercises and we are continuing to run short of time, but hopefully we'll do a few more at least before we close the session. So the next one, I'm going to leave this because it's sort of an extension of what we did, but you could use different routines, memory routines that look at each of your senses. So oftentimes, because we use the visual sense so much, and there is just so much of visuality around us, we forget the other senses. So it helps to sort of consciously go back and say, I'm going to use one more sense. And today I'm going to experience the world through a completely different sense. So just keep that in mind when you're stepping out and going back into the world. So this is from Highway 1, I think, and sorry, from the Oregon travel that I did with my friend. And this was like one of those beautiful moments where I saw both these seals at play. And it was just, again, something that I had photographs of it, but I was seeing it from a much, much further distance than the painting itself captures. But there was a memory of this incredible synchronicity between these two creatures. And there is no space for anything else. There's water and there is them. And you see this infinite play that's happening. And it's the memory that an artist brings into play and brings into the sketch, along with their own experience of the space. So it's not really a photographic experience, but it's also more than a photographic experience. And I think it's in that sense that when I say whether you're an artist or not an artist, it helps to bring your hand into play, to sketch and to write, because you're going to bring the self into play, and that self is going to expand from the boundaries that have been set by the world that we belong to. And that allows us to question those boundaries and move beyond those boundaries. So in a way, I think art is a tool. Art is also sort of just a very comfortable friend and guide that you can work with. So I'm going to read this piece of poem. It's again a continuation of the memory landscapes. And I tried saying that if I were to use the other senses in my writing, what and how would I write about some of the experiences? So the jasmine is a white flower with an incredible fragrance. And I said, it's not just that I'm smelling that fragrance, but I'm actually tasting that smell. And that's really that, the synesthetic moment of experience. And you hear the patterns on the leaves. It's not like when you see a pattern, you're actually visually seeing a pattern, but you're hearing the sound of flow in that pattern. So in a way, if you can open your senses one more step and one more step, then what happens and how do these senses come together? Because I think we sort of get stuck in our probably first grade or kindergarten lessons, which tells you that you taste with your mouth and you hear with your ear, and you just forget that it's not as simple as that. The senses are just incredibly complex evolutionary mechanisms, and we just need to play with them a lot more. So again, I tasted the smell of the jasmine and I heard the patterns on the leaves. I saw the smell of the rushes. I touched the flight of the kingfisher. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. What maps will you draw in my inner worlds? They seem just like the reticulate patterns that flow in and out of a leaf. And this, for me, is the step from the inner to the outer and outer back into the inner. And many times I think this is sort of a lost map because we see the outside and the outside remains there. And we have the inside and we have very clear boundaries of what the inside is. But there is a very simple link where we can bring that outer into the inner and we can project this inner back into the outer. And then there is this whole inner world of landscape and terrains that open up. That we can wander in and observe and engage. And we can continually change these inner landscapes. So for me, I think the question I'll leave you with for this whole memory and experience landscape, and of course, much of these we can have lots of debates, discussions, and conversations on. But can memories change? And why did we make a particular memory? And what we did during that one experience. It could be an experience of the night and watching a firefly, and it leaves a particular sort of memory. It could be fear. I mean, it's not always that we are in awe and wonder and splendor about the natural world. There are these moments of anxiety and fear when you're in a landscape that you cannot quite place. And somehow that can trigger a whole different kind of memory landscapes of the same space. So can we look at these memories closely and can we work with these memories instead of letting them be, instead of letting them past? Can we bring them back and work with them? That's as a way to reconnect with spaces that we have already been in. And sometimes it just so happens that what you saw in one landscape flows into a completely different landscape because your memories connect them. I don't think I have this painting here, but one of the large format works that I worked on during my doctoral work was a banyan tree that I had seen down south in Bandipur in Karnataka. But it got connected somehow to this common pochard that I saw in sort of the lower Himalayan range in Chandigarh, in the Sukna Lake. And somehow these landscapes came together. They're completely disparate, but your own memory and feeling and experience of stillness, perhaps, that I felt in both these landscapes connected them into a new landscape, which is interior. It looks very much visually like a landscape painting, but at the end of the day, these are completely different habitats and ecologies that came together. But there is to that ecology of the outside, the very fragile ecology of the inner that melds and brings and comes together. And that really is, I think, the magic of what our memories can do and what the poetry within us can do and what the writer and the ability to connect these dots can do. So just like push it as far as you can and see where it goes. Again, I'm going to skip this for lack of time. This is another sort of prompt or tool that you can work with. You can create your own word list. It really helps, on a daily basis, it's very difficult to find that exact word that you're looking for. And it helps to have a collection of words that you keep enjoying and you say, oh, I relish this word. And I feel and see and sense more than the word and its meaning. So sometimes it's like when I'm listening to the word broken, that has a sound to it, that has a feeling to it, that has an emotion to it. And when I have a collection of words, and there could be heron and there could be broken in the same word list that I have, and then the mind starts connecting. And it may not be the brokenness of the inner emotion at some point. It could just be a twig breaking as the heron walks. But it could also be a movement in your own interiority that changed as the heron walked. And there is that broken that emerges from there. So it helps to build your own sort of word connections. So perhaps we can take, again, 2 minutes, pick any 2 or 3 words from the list that you see. I hope it's big enough for everybody to see. Any 2 or 3 words and see what random connections you're able to make. Just a line that you write, and it can be a meaningless line, but you can just connect 2 completely different words that you see here. Does anybody have something they'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I would like to share.
Yeah, sure.
So, all the exercises that you gave, I think I have been working only on one piece, and I've been adding to that single piece. So I don't know if you can see. I'm sharing it on.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So these are not lines, so to say. These are just connections of dots that I experience my boundaries to be, and say this is the dog that I have been cuddling with every evening. So he also has his own sense of self, and then when we come together, I think that is where our boundaries start to get mingling and then dissolving. So firstly, I could not think of this boundary as a line. I could only think of, because you mentioned the word porosity. So
Right.
A straight line cannot be permeable, cannot allow the possibility of exchange. So that is why my line is a collection of dots, and
Right.
as it
Yeah.
beyond me, the dots start opening.
Right.
And one more piece that I think I could take away from is that it is not just whose breath are we breathing, but I like to think of it in a way that, okay, we are also eating food, right? So the plants also breathe the food that we eat,
Right.
and the animals that we eat, they also have their own sense of a boundary, or they
Yes.
also might have been breathing some air from another part of the world.
Right.
So all of it is coming into me, and then it is flowing through me. So I also feel of myself like a funnel or a filter through which all the material of the world comes, and then it also goes out. So I think that it is only the senses that give me the sense of boundary, and there's nothing else that binds me then.
Right.
And it's not my skin. It's not my skin that is binding me. I think it's
Right.
very permeable and like a filter. I don't know.
Lovely.
That's what
And I love the fact that you used the porous dots as a way to visualize form and line, and this whole experience that you are able to unfold. Thanks for that, Ridul. I think we are at about 12:10. So we'll try to take one more exercise, and then I'll open it for conversation, so we can just have an open conversation after that. This is something that's really fun that I've been doing for the last couple of years. And I call it becoming river, wing, tree, and tail. And a lot of times I think we become adults and we forget to be children again. And when you're a child, it's just so easy. Like if you're a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, you look at a monkey and it does jumps, it does leaps, and it's making faces at you, and you make it back. You don't think twice about it. It just happens. And if you're going past a tree or something else that looks funny or weird, you're just going to stop and say, Mama, look at that tree. I'm going to stand like that. And it just, you are not thinking about it at all. It's so funny to explore the world. It's just so exciting to see all these strange and wonderful things out there. So for me, that spirit of the child, if we were to bring back, that really was the question of saying becoming river, wing, tree, tail. And you can, of course, be very meditative and serious about it, but you can also have a lot of fun with it. So if I may ask, for those of you who have the energy and the patience to get out of your chairs, to be whatever you want to be. You know, it could be any creature that you have admired, you've experienced. Alternatively, there was this very, very beautiful experience I've had of watching a Kudiyattam performer. And we asked him, it's from Kerala in South India. It's a very beautiful traditional theatre dance form. And we asked this remarkable performer how he would perform a waterfall. We said, oftentimes you're sitting while you're performing. It's not that you're actually moving around. And what would be the subtlest way in which you would show a roaring waterfall? And all he did was he took these 2 fingers and he started just moving those 2 fingers like that. And that was it. And for him, that was the waterfall, coming down in all its sort of thunderous flow. And all that he had to do was bring his entire body into those 2 fingers. So I'll leave it to you to use your bodies in whichever way you want, but like a child, imagine and see if your body can move, and if it can move and become something else. And the body is such a great conduit that we often forget, because it's also the most stable boundary that we have in which we recognize ourselves as human. But it's also the most vulnerable of the boundaries. And the moment you break it, you're into the other world. So become whatever you want to become. So just give yourself a minute to have fun with becoming river, wing, tree, or tail. And if you're open to sharing the moments, then do switch on your videos, because then I think it'd be a lot of fun for all of us to sort of get into being other things. And also finding the body movement for that. I don't know. Perhaps as a trained dancer, the water flows for me like this. But there could be so many other ways in which we may intuit, and we may think about trying to find a movement that matches this being that we admire, that we cherish, that we want to make it become part of our own being. From there, I'm going to step into the next piece, which is to say becoming tree, if you were to be. What is this tree that you know? And it's fun, and I always think, my God, how come these trees are in one place, but they seem to be having the most fantastic journeys on the planet? It's crazy, like, you go and look at different trees, and you just fall in love with one after another, and you say, what is this form? This looks so different. And there are some of the trees that I call completely mad dervishes, and it's like the architecture of the tree, when you see it, seems like it's spinning, and it's thrown its branches all around. And what is this tree that we intuit, not just the tree that we see. And we get stuck sometimes in this, the world of what we see and the world of what we feel. And we don't quite know how to connect the two. And for me, I think there was the first painting I did with a tree which had blue leaves. I said, my God, I have broken out of my notion of a tree with green leaves. And why did I draw blue leaves? And then you suddenly realize, oh, for me, I was trying to say that this tree is almost like sky to me. And the only thing I could do was bring blue leaves to it to say that that's my experience or my feeling of this tree. Again, I think I use art as both as a tool and a guide and a friend, but it really helped to break away from this boundary, the stark boundary of the tree that I see and the tree that I intuit. So I'll again, some of these exercises, I'll leave it with you, and I hope that you will take it up perhaps a little later. And I would like us to have at least, the last 15 minutes in conversation. I'll close the thing with the last few slides that I have. I'll take a few minutes so I can close it well. This is the poem that I had written when I was traveling as part of this very beautiful landscape in Coorg, again in South India, Karnataka. And then there was this moment when I felt that all the threads of all the landscapes I had been in were beginning to connect. So there's one landscape in its subtleties of green, golden browns, old abandoned paddy fields, Ketaki rising to steal the sky, cane curving into itself. Threads of snake and frog, wild berries and clay, gova and marsh, stream and recovering earth. One landscape, one thread, one being. This was a very beautiful landscape. It had been paddy fields for a very, very long time, and then the owner had decided to let it become a forested land, and he had let it go back to the wild. So this was an intermediate landscape, and we walked through this muddy, marshy clay, and we saw this cane and ketaki. I cannot remember the English name for it, but again, a very, very beautiful plant. Pandanus, I think, is the species. And we went past these Malabar pit vipers that were on this landscape, and there were frogs croaking everywhere. Physically, bodily, we were just, even to lift a leg in the clay, marshy land was quite incredible. And then you're suddenly part of all of this, and you find the threads that connect. And this is a painting, again, from the same experience, not necessarily this particular landscape, but another place where I had seen a waterfall and a kukal just come flash by, and we were looking for dancing frogs in the landscape, which are so minute, they're like the size of a fingernail. And we had this gorgeous, huge waterfall and stream and rocks and rainforest. And what you're hunting for is this tiny dancing frog, which is the size of a nail. And we did find him. So it was one of those remarkable moments of discovery and excitement. So I'll leave you with this last question of saying, can we reimagine ourselves? It's so easy somehow to fall into the plot, sort of almost a sinister plot of saying that you and the nature are different. So is there a way that we can sort of say that, oh, if that's not true, then what is the self that I am? And how do I imagine, how do I image this self? How do I write about it? How do I express and articulate what the self is? And that really, I think, was the whole idea of saying the porous self. And for you, it may have a completely different word. You may have new meanings, and I think that's great. So this is a self where you can catch elephants clearly. And this is another one, again, from this landscape of Bandipur, where somehow watching mothers playing with children and gores and all other creatures, yourself expands and you don't quite know where you end and the other begins, whether it's human or whether it is anything else, any other being in the natural world. So Allow the ripples to flow, dream yourselves into your own versions of the porous self, and become part of life. So that's it for the presentation. So I'll open it up for conversation now. Thank you. Rashmi, would you like to sort of take this part into conversation?
We started with Josie's presence, and I must acknowledge Eve, who has joined us now, two of the founders of Climate Coaching Alliance who are here. And thank you so much to the two of you. Josie, you sat through the entire session and you were so happy when you saw the question Srivi had posted in the poster. So maybe you should start off what your experience was being part of this.
Well, I'd be delighted. Thank you so much, Rashmi. And thank you, Srivi. That was an exquisite afternoon for me, spending an hour with you. And I loved the way you drew experiences and allowed us to turn them in. I love the poetry. I love the images and the direction to help explore that for ourselves. And you know, when we go to, I don't know how to express this, so please know that I'm trying to express it in the best way I can, even though I'm being clumsy. In the Western world, we tend to talk so much, and this was just a beautiful experience, and I want to thank you so much. I've got goosebumps on my skin, and it's really meaningful and a really important question that you're posing. How do we recognise nature within us? How do we recognise ourselves as nature without boundaries? And I just found that an exquisite experience, and I'd love to do it again. So I don't have a question. I'm just sort of still sitting in the experience, and I'm going to go back and do some of those exercises. But I just wanted to express my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josie. It was such a pleasure watching you on the other side, and really, really thanks for your presence. I think that it was most beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, would anybody, JW, I'm sorry, we don't know your name, so can you introduce yourself to us and tell us your experience?
My name's Jay. I'm here in Long Beach, California. It's still Saturday night. It's a confluence of all sorts of different things that brought me to this moment in my life, and without all that, I would not have gotten to be here this evening and witness, you know, just lots of questions that I feel I need right now. Giving myself the opportunity to answer those questions. And I really appreciated all the prompts and the different ways of, I don't know, exploring the facets of this very important question. And yeah, I'm very grateful that, you know, an internet search brought me to, here's some coaches who are going to talk about the climate, and that's important to me. And so now, thanks to Zoom, and ironically, thanks to COVID, I can just go to India. Why not? So thank you very much.
Why not?
So beautifully said. Ironically, thanks to COVID, I think all of us are connected. And that's the brighter side of the pandemic, a resilience that nature taught us, how to see the other side whenever she feels that it's time to step back and look at everything with a different perspective. So anybody else on the call, Sally, Eve, would you want to say something? Shubham?
I think it brings up for me how limiting how we can look at things is. You know, here I am sitting in the United Kingdom, and we talk a lot, and actually, I mean, it reminds me of how much I love music and poetry and painting, despite being told at about the age of 6. No, not that young, maybe 11, that I was hopeless at painting, which just stopped me doing it, which is so sad. But what it got me to do is to reconnect with things in a way that just goes beyond words. And I'm just sitting here feeling how limited words are, and how when we use other forms of expression, how it adds to the richness of our lives, that whole tapestry. And so I'm thinking, how can we pick up on that in the CCA too? Because there's so much talk. So I hope we can offer this session again as a standalone session, and maybe even as a longer session, so that people can really experience it. Mind you, I haven't asked you that, Srivi, or Rashmi, but there you go. That it was just extraordinarily beautiful, and I'm so thankful because I remembered things I'd completely forgotten.
Yes, thank you so much, Eve. That
Thank
was
you.
lovely to hear from you. And I think for me, while I was doing my doctorate, it was such an important part. I did a practice-based PhD, and in India, it's not yet quite opened up as a space in doctoral research. So there was a lot of sort of conflict to put it out there and say that, you know, this is academic work, but I'm going to be painting and I'm going to be talking about the self and the subjective inquiries. But I'm very glad that I had the support of you know, a great number of people and my examiners eventually, that I was able to articulate it and be confident about it and not say like, okay, I'm probably crazy to be doing this stuff, but to really say that, you know, it does make a world of difference in opening so many different ways of looking at the world. Yeah, so thank you so much for that.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Chatura.
Yeah, Chatura.
Hi, I'm Chatura, and I'm Srivi's colleague at Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology. So my training has been actually as a writer my whole life, except for 1 year in fine arts at Stella Maris College in Chennai, where in fact Srivi also studied. She graduated from there. So, but my journey with Srivi has been amazing in the sense that these explorations of hers, and being a faculty at an Art and Design Institute, but mainly Srivi's own explorations and sharings have helped me feel like taking up drawing and painting, nature drawing and painting. And whenever I've shown her stuff, she has just so joyously exclaimed over blue leaves on trees and just my very wild use of color. And it's just been so amazing. This journey with her has been so amazing. So I really enjoyed this presentation as well, Srivi, and I enjoyed the exercises. And thank you so much for just allowing.
Thank you,
just
Chatura.
allowing for people like me to look at this as also being a way to live, and not just a way to live, but the way to live as well.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we have lovely memories where Chatura lost her voice and I became her voice for a while in a children's literature festival, and that's how we connected. And I think when we talk about nature, it's not just nature, right? It's our own boundaries as humans. And yes, there is always the need to protect ourselves. There's always a need for a safe boundary in our relationships. But there's also these incredible moments when we somehow are in the presence of another person and the thoughts flow and you don't speak, but you know what the other person wants, you know what you want. And it just, you know, miracles happen. So Chatura is one of my miracles.
Thank you. Thanks, Sri.
Yes, Mridul, you can go ahead. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question to Srivi in particular, and I phrase it in 2 parts. So I want to know that what is the difference between acknowledging my porous self through artistic expression or through, say, the ascetic way of meditation. So what is the difference between acknowledging my porous self through either of these? And in particular, what drives your proclivity towards artistic expression?
Okay, lots. And I'll just try my best. But I think it's not, for me, like, as I had shared earlier, the sense of the porous self had always been there, even as a child. And I didn't know quite where to place it. I used to think that there were mystical experiences. I didn't find a language for it. I often didn't share it. It was very private between my sister and me, often just, knowing that we each other had this ability to experience the world, but not publicly talking about it. And of course, over time, I did delve a lot into Indian philosophy and Indian aesthetics, both as part of my academic work and my own personal interest. What I find, perhaps more so from 2009 onwards, I was very deeply affected by the ecological crisis and about just going everywhere and seeing trees being cut down, mountains being, dynamited, and you were just, you feel that something in you is crashing. And there was this deep grief and very tormenting grief that I was going through for the landscape. And also when I actually did come across Joanna Macy's work, and um, Rashmi had shared with me, and I read about how climate change, the whole organization is connected to Joanna Macy's work. And in her work, she talks about turning grief into meaningful action. And that was a very profound moment to then ask and channel all of this experience into the natural world in particular, to make it sort of the highlight. So in that sense, when you talk about the porous self, yes, you could place it in the meditative, you could place it in the aesthetic, but when you place it consciously in the natural world, which we are currently all of us questioning, what is our role and how we can work with it, then I think it allows you to intimately ask questions about that space. Because when you go into meditation, the language is different. When you go into aesthetics, the language is different. You could be working with anything and everything. But here I am going to say that I'm looking at a heron in this, lake, which is in my city, and I want to talk about the heron. I don't want to talk about God. I don't want to talk about mysticism. I just want to talk about the heron. And that's a very pertinent decision that I made. I think that's really how I would sort of respond to you at the moment.
Okay, so if
we have a question actually,
yeah, sure.
My nephew Tushar is here, and he had a question for Srivi.
Yeah.
Can you ask?
Yeah, hello. I was wondering about how your idea of the porous self determines your relationship with time.
Can you repeat it? I missed the last
How
bit.
your idea of the porous self determines your relationship with time, because you were saying I'm looking at the mountains being eroded, and there's this idea that we're caught in time and we're looking at all of these changes that happen through time. So when you have a porous self, then there's also a sense of eternal involved.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a powerful question, and you're absolutely right in saying, using the word eternal. You are you enter a space where eons flow through you. You are not looking at time as, it's both the moment, the flash, and when you look at something like a tailor bird that's flitting between one leaf to the other, there is that instantaneity of time. But you also look at this body or this being that has evolved, and you're into evolutionary time, and you're into geological time, and you're into time that is before time. It almost seamlessly, I think, as Joanna Macy would probably use the word deep time or deep space, you do enter these quite frequently when you start stabilizing yourself in the porous self. Again, I think it's probably much larger and longer conversations to be had. And I love the way Eve mentioned earlier that this, I'm probably mixing up who mentioned it, but the fact that this is a way of life. And in this way of life, you have new rules, you have new boundaries. It's not that you have nothing. It's not like once you have hit the porous self, then you disperse, which would be great. But given that that's not an option and we have our bread and butter to earn and all the rest of the stuff, there are new rules. And I think time and space are one of those. And you suddenly, like when you when this deep time or eternal time unravels, you also have to be perhaps at that same time performing another action in the real world. So then how do you slip between these two time zones? I think all of those becomes journeys in which we create new ways of slipping in and out of these boundaries, slipping in and out of times and spaces. And over a period of time, I feel like that deep time becomes something in your consciousness that you're able to sense and experience constantly. It just happens. And I don't know if there's a method to this madness, but yeah, over time it happens.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone else has a question, or maybe I can close the session then. And allow Srivi to breathe. Okay, I'd love to end with what I wrote, Srivi, when you asked us to pick 2 words for prompts.
Right.
And I picked signatures of nature and the kingfisher. And I'd say that the signatures of nature are so powerful and meaningful. Each shade of color used is something that is absolutely purposeful. The kingfisher is one such example of what nature can be in a photograph. Oh, I'm so grateful that I am part of her creation as well. Every moment when alive, I can enjoy her autograph. Thank you so much for helping us connect our porous selves to ourselves today. And thanks to each one of you who's given your Sunday morning to be here. This would go on YouTube and the link would be available with CCA as well. You can see it on our website. And as much as possible, what I request you is to just be an eco warrior and tell the world this is the time to become one with nature because we are no different. And Srivi took us through a very beautiful experience to show how. And all those tools and exercises, please revisit them because they are powerful. And thank you so much, Srivi, for your generosity. Thanks a lot. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.